Welcome back. In the previous video, I've introduced the basic Edge tool and noted that you have to log online and register. I hope you've all now registered and you do have access to the tool itself. We've also spoken about the nature of comparison that's being undertaken. And so what you'll see here in the screen in front of you is the basic, what we can call the dashboard of the Edge tool. At the very top, there's the basic information, my own information, if I want to go back to the home page and so forth. What you'll see is the version that's being used. So they do update it every few years to make sure that it is relevant. And then under File, you can also open, save, rename, and so forth. So what you'll see here is I've basically set up a previous project already. So I've got a bunch of um, quantifications already in place, but you might want to start with a new project, or you might have developed a project already. So you can open it and you can adjust it again. There's obviously the save button. That's important. So what you'll see here is on the side, there is a bunch of occupancies that you can choose to assess the building. So what I would advise is if you undertake the assessment of or the using of the tool in future projects, you can also always choose the occupancy that's very close to the type of project you are doing. You'll find then once you choose an occupancy down at the building data, the location data, and sometimes it's at the building data, it's different for the different occupancies. You can actually define the type of occupancy. So in the housing setup, you can change it from something like subsidized, for instance, so that's something like the RDP houses, or middle or high class. So it's a way for them to define the nature of consumption that takes place. Now, that is different for the other different occupancies. Something like, for instance, education will then differentiate between schools and universities and libraries, for instance. Retail has its own set of perimeters. So try and use your occupancy as close or similar to the actual building that you are designing, or the occupancy or the space you're working with, and then try and define it as close as possible. A very important rule, and I'm going to repeat it a few times, but what the guys from the IFC who are developing the project requested me to note is that whenever you start a new project and you're not going to go for certification, remember that is the tool to certify a project, so it will be noted as an EDGE certified building. You need to choose there in the very beginning on the project details, where you say, do you intend to certify? Choose no, and then when you name the project, whenever you name the project, keep to test. So the first word must be test, and then you can give it whatever name. So what happens is they get a whole database of all the Edge tool projects that are under certification or under the process of certification at the moment, and they remove anybody who's using it as a design tool. So they just don't want to deal with the information, which I think is fair for them. So it gives us access to this tool. So you can give the basic information, test house, for instance, what I've done there. I'm looking at a house in this case, so it'll be one building. My own information, you're welcome. You won't get strange emails or whatever. Everywhere where there's an asterisk, it's good to import the information or fill in the information, but you're welcome to add the country, the state. This is just basic project information. Under share with investors or banks, it's once you go for certification, it's good for them to also know if it's for in terms of getting loans and so forth. So it's really not important in your case. So you can add your information there. You'll see there's an upload and download button. So this is really all about projects as they go for certification. They actually need to upload evidence of what you're only going to use it for testing or for design purposes. So you can simply just leave it as it is. Under sub-project details, again, it requests information. From my own experience, it's important to, again, fill in everything at the asterisk. So you'll find that, I didn't necessarily always add as much specific information. Under the certification stage, it's good to note that it's preliminary because obviously it's a new building or a new design. It's not post-occupancy or post-construction phase. Under the type, it's not a new build, it's a new building. You might choose to work with an existing building in future, then you'll state it as such. There's a certain amount of savings and so on you'll find. Then really important, you get to location data. Now this is where the tool becomes, I think, very effective. So here you add in the specific country, the city. So under South Africa, there's a bunch of cities or metros available, and the project, the income level. So what this means is this allows this tool to now access a database that has information regarding South Africa first. So it'll be related to our energy mix, our basic income or consumption patterns, but also really important, identify the right base case. So if you choose South Africa, then it already identifies the base case is a SANS 10400 compliant building. So if SANS says that the basic building consumption is 80 kilowatt hours per square meter per year, that's the figure that they'll be using as a base case before you start saving anything on top of that. Then if you choose the city, that is when you start identifying the weather file that is used. So it starts checking what the efficiency of certain options. So in the background, there is a little calculator that says, okay, you've chosen a certain U value, for instance, and it works up to a certain point within whatever climate you've got. So it's very basic, this modeling file. And then, like I said previously, the income category gives us a little bit more information regarding the consumption or the use of a building. As you move down, you need to start adding information about this project. So you'll see you can choose whether it's, in this case, houses or apartments. And then again, when I choose it, you see it updates a little bit. And then you start adding the information. So it's the square meterage, the amount of bedrooms, the amount of floors, number of units and so forth. So and occupancy of people per unit and so forth. And you'll see that it then makes a series of assumptions based on a typical building in the South African context. So that is basic assumptions, and you're also always welcome to go and say, you know what, no, in the house I'm designing, a bedroom is not 50 square meters, it's 35, for instance, in this case, or it's 6, or let's make it 80. And what happens is you then adjust it. So what's interesting here is this tool is really a simplified modeling process, and therefore it makes a bunch of assumptions, but you are welcome to change some things around within it. It then adjusts the balance of the rest of the occupancies in the room itself or the spaces accordingly. You can then identify, so for instance, in a housing section, there's a choice to add air conditioning or not, and whether there's any space heating or not. In the other occupancies, there will be other options. So it's about making sure there's the basic assumptions are in place. You'll also see that there's an option to go into what we call key assumptions of the base case. I would not advise changing anything here, but what this actually shows you is, for instance, the typical CO2 emissions per kilowatt hour of energy in South Africa. So this is the South African context. That's where I think this tool is actually quite effective. So all the basic information is based on the South African context and regulations, and therefore you see these figures being used. This is to set up your base case. So you can say save, you've now set up your base case, and you can choose to go to your next step. Now you'll see there's 3 options. There you can look at energy, water, and materials. You'll see at the top there's the basic consumption of this base case itself. And what you then have as an option, and this is where I think it really is a nice design tool, is you might find when you're at the start of a project, or you've developed a project quite far, but now you need to start planning what type of sustainable strategies or resource efficiency strategies would you like to employ within this project? Which means, so what you'll see is I'm unticking any of the strategies, and you might get to a project like this. We're saying this is a project, this is the base case. The the basic scenario of using a building in South Africa. Then you can start identifying certain strategies which are sustainable or more efficient in their use. So you can, for instance, say, currently we are, you might want to change the window and wall ratio to 26.25, or you might say, you know what, I think we can try to go for 15%. It's a bit low, but you might find sometimes we're designing houses with a 60% window to wall ratio, which obviously has a massive impact in terms of energy consumption because of the low insulation value of glazing itself. So you can tick it. What you can do as well is you can also adjust it, or you can also calculate the amount of glazing. So what you might find is you might have a project currently which you've designed up to a certain pace, level, and you might say, let me go and calculate it. And you can go and open the calculator, and you basically specify the amount of wall on the northern side and the amount of glazing, and it gives you a total average. So let's say 50 square meters over 100. I mean, some of these are crazy, like on the eastern side, 100 square meter wall with 80 square meters glazing. It's crazy having 80%. I say, no, that's all wrong. I might just 20%. And then you can see your window to wall ratio changing at 17.5. You can add it in, and immediately you see a difference in energy use. Now, you can see there it says you've now saved 37% of the energy. So it's quite significant. I don't doubt for a moment that this is based on the older base case as well, so one should be aware of that. But what you'll see here is under the categories down below, which is the basic fixed energy consumption within the building, and then what we call the virtual energy. This is energy that would be used to achieve thermal comfort. You can see that by adjusting the actual glazing, you might find that there's a significant saving. Now, again, there's a series of options that you can take. You can, like for instance, I see that this is why I have such a big savings, because there's still photovoltaics being selected here, which will change it significantly because I'll save quite a lot of energy. But what you'll find then is, as you go through this list, there's a bunch of options you can choose, you can take. You can always adjust it, you can work it out as well. There's always a calculator, and there's always a way of changing the actual U value, or solar, like for instance here, the solar heat gain factor. And this allows you to test how effective certain strategies are. Now, be aware, you can therefore choose a bunch of strategies and then say, well, now my building saves all of it, and then realize, or then you need to actually go and implement it, and you realize how difficult it is to implement. So I would always use this as a kind of iterative tool. So you have a design, you might say, you know what, I'm going to try and optimize one of the classrooms. You choose a classroom, you get the area and so forth, and you see, okay, there's a bunch of options I can take. Now there's easy stuff, like for instance, adding reflective paint. It's not a difficult thing, it's a specification question. But there's more difficult things as well, such as ensuring natural ventilation. If you only have one window in the whole 100 square meter room, then natural ventilation is really difficult to achieve. So you can't tick it. Well, you can always tick it, but it will show you what you can achieve if you have natural ventilation. But you need to be sure that you can achieve that. So I'm not going to go down through the whole list. I think you're welcome to go through this in your own time. It's really interesting. I will share additional information, because you can actually access the user guide that gives you more information regarding these strategies, how they're used, how they are implemented, how they're considered, and so forth. But what you'll see is, so you can look at energy. You can also look at water. Energy is possibly the biggest focus, but in water, you can also choose a series of strategies like low flow taps and so forth, or grey water recycling and so forth. And you can also look at materials. And choosing certain materials will lead to certain embodied energy savings. What this means is, this tool gives you, I think, quite a a broad scope of design decisions that can be taken, that can be quantified. One must take care, though, that this still is simply a very generic approach. It still only takes a base case. It's not very specific into your specific case that's designed within that context. But it's a brilliant way to understand the impact of certain strategies. And if you use it to define strategies and see how effective they are, you can use it as a way to build your case for certain decisions that are taken. Okay, so you might have now gone through this whole process of designing a project, um, choosing certain strategies. You now have an overall energy consumption that's available. What do you do now? Is the question. What you can do, and you'll see it's updating again. Um, you can use the edge assessment. You can click on it, and now it prepares a file for you, and you end up with a PDF document as the one you're seeing at the moment. This you can save, so you can save it out of the file, and it gives you all the basic information, like you filled it in. Basic context, where you're located, what type of building it is, what the base case scenario is, how much, what the floor area is, and so forth. And then it goes down to, so there's all the basic assumptions, and it goes down to the energy strategies that have been followed. So it shows here what the base case is, what you've achieved through your savings, and it shows you what we've done. We've reduced the window to wall ratio, we've added higher thermal performance glazing and natural ventilation, and you can go down and see what you've done in terms of water and in terms of materials. So, and then it basically just gives a lot of basic documentation that would be required if you go for certification. Now, what does this mean? It means you can actually use this information again to populate a report or to use it to inform a certain report or communicate it however you would like to do it. But don't see this as this is the only document and you need to add it as an addenda to any document. You can extract from that and use it within your designs or decision making processes. Um, this is this is a very short movie. I think this is a very simple program. One needs to understand the limitations of this program. Like I stated before, it's not a design program, but it helps with design decision making and it helps quantifying that, which I think is really important for designers, so that you have more certainty of the certain design decisions. I also think it's a nice way to identify strategies that can be explored. Please do be aware of the fact that this is developed as an international tool, which means there will be objects or strategies that you can follow, like, for instance, recharging the aquifer below ground level. Now, that is great, but it's not necessarily possible in your project. So you always need to be assured about there is a bunch of strategies that can be followed, but these must be tested within the context of your project. If they can and they work, then you've got the certainty that it actually makes a difference. You're welcome to contact me, and if you have any questions regarding that, I will also see that I can see whether I can share the online resource file with you, but I might just be able to share the link with you. Yeah, and well, good luck. Do try and use it with the assignment, like I said, like I advise you use, but use this as also in your future in your design process. I really think it is a really nice resource to use.